Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
She froze, her confidence evaporating slightly. "Please, John," she said, switching to a more vulnerable tone. "I just want to be close to you. I sincerely want to. I miss this more than you probably understand." I looked at her, my expression colder than I felt, but I didn't let her see any weakness. "Tell me one thing," I said sharply, my voice cutting through the tension. "Who taught you to wear such things? Because I don't remember you ever wearing something like this for me." She shuddered. "I like it," she replied, shifting her weight awkwardly, as if caught off guard. "I thought you'd like it too. And what about the rest of it?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. "Who helped you choose that haircut? And the fitness routines that make you look so fit? What kind of exercises are you doing? Pilates? Yoga?" I paused before continuing. "No, I doubt it." I walked around the table and past her, heading for the door. "And the rest?" I added. "Do you think I don't know who helped you with all of it?" When I reached the door, I turned to face her. Her face was full of embarrassment, perhaps even shame. "Welcome to the club," I said, bitterness creeping into my tone. Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "I wouldn't touch you if you begged me," I added, turning away. "You see, I made a vow to be faithful to my wife, to share myself only with her. And I still honor that vow. It means something to me." I glanced at her one last time, my gaze filled with contempt. "My wife is not here," I said, before slamming the door behind me. Underscore. When I saw Karen again, she was sitting in sweatpants, curled up in a chair, flipping through TV channels without really watching. She didn't look at me as I passed by, though I noticed her jaw tighten. She probably didn't expect me to notice, but I did. The silence was thick. For the next 2 weeks, Karen played the role of the family member, pretending everything was fine. When we went to the zoo, she glanced at me occasionally, looking for a crack in my facade, hoping to find some hint of vulnerability in me. She didn't mention meeting with Carl, and I assumed that was part of her strategy. I knew they were still seeing each other. It was impossible not to, but the details of it remained a mystery to me. On the Thursday of the second week, I decided to investigate. After lunch, I called her office. "May I speak with Mrs. Sanders?" I asked, using her work phone number. "Who's calling?" The voice on the other end asked. "This is her husband," I said, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause. "Is something wrong?" "Sorry, sir, but Mrs. Sanders is out of town right now," the receptionist replied. "Out of town?" I repeated, a cold realization creeping over me. "Well, wherever she is, I'll talk to her when she gets back." I could almost hear the receptionist's confusion before I hung up. I chuckled without humor. I had known for some time that Karen had been using her vacation days to secretly meet Carl. But now, it seemed like she was back to her old tricks, pretending to work on our relationship while still seeing him behind my back. It was time for a lesson. I carefully planned everything. Over the weekend, I made the announcement to the family. "Guess what's coming up next?" I said with a smile at dinner. "We're going to Disneyland." The girls immediately squealed in delight, bombarding me with excited questions. I answered as best as I could, but Karen looked across the table, her expression a strange mix of doubt, shock, anger, and something darker. "Disneyland?" she muttered almost to herself, before frowning and leaning forward. "We can't afford this, John. Our finances are already in dire straits." I knew exactly what she meant, but I simply shrugged. "Yes, it costs a lot, but everything's already paid for and arranged. Next time, we definitely won't be able to afford it. So, we'll have to make the most of this trip." I winked at the girls, feeling a slight twinge of satisfaction as I laid out the details. The trip was big, a week-long getaway that drained almost all of our savings. It was the kind of impulsive mistake that financial planners dread. I even rented an apartment, not just a hotel room, so we'd have a full base with all the comforts of home. By the time I finished, Karen looked more stunned than I had expected. "I can't believe you spent all our money without consulting me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Are we suddenly consulting each other before making decisions regarding the marriage?" I asked, smiling slightly. He shrugged as he put a forkful of food in his mouth. "I think this is the last year the girls are young enough for something like this. Soon, it won't be magical anymore, so it's now or never. And we clearly need some family time." Karen turned pale at his words. But it's so much money, she said softly. We'll be fine, I replied. As long as there are no surprise medical bills, no car breakdowns, and no need to take unpaid time off from work. Karen's face became even paler. John, I'm not sure I have enough vacation days for that. I pretended to be surprised. Is that true? She blushed and looked down. I've already used most of them. I put my fork down. You've been with the company a long time, Karen. I'm sure you've accumulated enough vacation days over the years. Her blush deepened. I spent them all, actually. Or almost all of them. And I'm really behind on some big projects because I've been away from work so much lately. I read her expression carefully. So, you weren't at work the last time? I said, a hint of sarcasm in my voice. She didn't look up but nodded slightly. I pretended to consider this information before standing up. So, the honesty in our relationship you mentioned didn't include any mention of meeting him? I muttered, more to myself than to her. You know, I really believed for a while that you were trying to be part of the family again, Karen. But it seems like we can never be enough for you, can we? I left the room without looking back. She didn't try to follow me. I sat down with a book in the living room, allowing myself a slight smile. Mission accomplished. I was going to spend a whole week at Disneyland with my daughters, and a whole week away from my unfaithful wife. And the best part was that it was all her doing. A few days later, Karen's mother came to visit. I'm not sure if she noticed the tension between us, but if she did, I'm sure she would have been pleased. She never really liked me, to be honest. I think she probably hated me, but she had that ability to say it without saying it directly. I'd love to tell you that I don't understand why, but she was deeply religious, and I'm an outspoken atheist, so anything I said or did didn't matter to her. I would forever remain a source of resentment for her. I often wondered what she would think if she found out that her perfect daughter had been unfaithful. Would she be happy, or would she be too scandalized to see the irony in my suffering? Honestly, I think her reaction would depend on who was there to witness it. At first, she noticed that I had lost weight, but then she just continued. If they decide to lose weight, they should know that not everyone is suited to being thin, Karen's mother said, rolling her eyes as she spoke. I'm not losing weight, I replied. I just don't feel like eating. Well, try to change that before you lose another size, she said, smiling tightly at her daughter. I don't think anyone would like that. Karen, as if in response to her mother's words, quietly began preparing my favorite dish. She spent the entire dinner biting her lip, glancing at me, waiting for me to start eating. John, she said softly at one point, glancing at the girls and clearly choosing her words more carefully. It's already hard for them to force themselves to eat if Dad sets a bad example. I looked at her long and hard, mentally going through countless possible responses, but she was right. I sighed and twirled my fork in my hands. I'm just not feeling well. I think I'll go to bed early, I said, hoping this would at least calm her down a little. Now, I wasn't setting a bad example. She seemed to huff in annoyance as I left the room and headed toward the bedroom. Over the next few weeks, Karen tried to talk to me more than once about the Disneyland trip. Essentially, she was trying to talk me out of it. At first, she apologized and expressed regret that she didn't have enough vacation days. But as I continued to ignore her attempts, she became increasingly irritable and angry. In the last few days before the trip, her behavior turned downright hostile. She would throw subtle references to her affair in my face, making quiet, snarky remarks about how at least she wouldn't need to go to Disneyland to have fun. I ignored her. Strangely, for the first time since her betrayal, these comments didn't hurt me. Karen quickly noticed this shift in my behavior. For some reason, I still don't understand. Her first reaction was to feel offended. I still remember the moment she made another sarcastic comment about spending a whole week with Carl. When she saw that it no longer hurt me, she immediately fell silent. She looked at me as if I were a child who had just been reprimanded, and then, almost in a flash, she ran out of the room. I just shook my head and went back to my journal. I had no intention of trying to understand her strange behavioral shifts anymore. From experience, I knew it was a lost cause. But for some reason, that image of her running out of the room stuck with me and made it hard to concentrate on the article I was reading. After a while, I put the magazine aside and did something I'm not particularly proud of. I went to the cabinet above the stove, which only I could reach, and found the old pack of cigarettes. I had left this pack there 2 years ago when I finally quit smoking. I felt better just knowing they were at hand. Even though so much had happened, I hadn't felt the urge to touch them until this moment. I was standing on the back porch when Karen found me. "When did you start smoking again?" she asked. "I took a drag. Just now," I replied, coughing. Not as good as I remembered, but still. She was silent for several minutes. "Did you want something?" I asked. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. I don't even know how I ended up like this, but it has to stop." She looked at me, then added, "I finally understand why you did it." I raised an eyebrow. "I was so narcissistic." She continued, "I really thought it was all about me. I thought you couldn't live without me, or that you might even be turned on by all this." She smiled bitterly. "Then tonight, when I threw another snarky comment at you and you didn't react. Your words would have hurt me if we'd switched places, but you." She looked at me in surprise. "You just let them pass you by." And at that moment, I realized I was no longer holding you. I finally realized you had broken up with me. I took another drag and threw the cigarette away. "It was about the girls, right? You did all this for them." I nodded. "They're so happy. You did an amazing job protecting them from all of this," she sobbed. "You ruined your life so they could be children a little longer." I didn't respond. "You'll take photos, right? At Disneyland?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "They'll never forget this trip. It'll be such a wonderful memory." She suddenly started sobbing harder. "This is the only way I can survive it." "Of course I'll take photos," I said, but I didn't say anything more or try to hug her. I just let her cry. She was now someone else's problem. "Thank you," she finally said when she had pulled herself together. "Thank you for the photos." After that, she disappeared into the house. Disneyland was amazing. The girls enjoyed every moment of it. One of the most wonderful things about children is their ability to make waiting in line an adventure as long as they have someone nearby. I actually took a lot of pictures and let the girls call their mom every night to tell her about their experiences on the trip. I didn't do this to annoy her, but knowing their joyful cries added to her misery felt like a small victory. Other than these calls, I honestly had no idea what Karen was doing during this time. But I knew one thing. She almost never crossed my mind. And in no language in the world can I find words to express what a relief that was for me. Suddenly, I could sleep at night again. I could taste food again. And I felt a sense of clarity and strength, as if I were under the influence of something powerful. The past few months had been incredibly difficult, but now I felt like I had finally reached a point where Karen couldn't hurt me anymore. However, there was one obvious flaw in this thinking. At the very least, I had no interest in intimacy. Perhaps that's not quite the right way to put it, but there were plenty of beautiful women around. They looked even more attractive in the sunlight, and I could appreciate their beauty, admire it from afar, but I couldn't imagine myself being someone worthy of their attention. No matter how much progress I had made, my ego and self-esteem were still damaged by Karen's betrayal. When we first met, I was in the prime of my life, young, athletic, with a full head of hair. From the moment we met, I devoted myself to her. But even this, my absolute best, hadn't been enough for her. If all I had to offer, my very best, wasn't enough, then what could I possibly offer to anyone else? Of course, this logic was flawed, but when you're betrayed by someone you love, it's like falling from a great height. The more you love them, the higher the fall, and the more confused you are when you hit the ground. If someone tells you they were able to just stand up, dust themselves off, and move on, it's likely because they didn't fall very far. So, no, I didn't feel attractive, and I wasn't completely healed. But that was okay. I was proud of the progress I had made, and the thought of fully experiencing intimate desire again was just as frightening as it was intriguing. Long story short, we had a wonderful week at Disneyland and then returned home. Karen seemed a little sad and withdrawn when we got back, although she did ask the girls questions about their trip and genuinely smiled and laughed with them. She continued to meet with Carl, but there was a noticeable shift in her energy. She was no longer as cheerful and lively as she had been in recent months. I noticed this, but I didn't take the time to think about the meaning of these changes. I was simply glad that she finally seemed to understand where we stood and was no longer trying to change the status quo. However, 3 weeks after returning from the trip, Karen cautiously asked if I wanted to go to Bailey's next party. I didn't even know they were having a party. They called a few days ago and invited us, she explained, giving me a nervous look. If you don't want to go, she trailed off, but I already knew what she meant. I frowned, remembering how Bailey's last party had ended, but then brushed the thoughts aside. The girls will like it, I said. We both knew that was enough of an answer. I won't go near him, she assured me. But don't waste our time on promises that mean nothing. I still hoped she meant it this time. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Karen fidgeted restlessly, rolling over, crumpling the pillow, and scratching her shoulder irritably. Then she sighed heavily and rolled over again. I just lay there in the dark, listening. I had played this game for a long time, waiting for the silence that night brings. It was something new for her, and I had no doubt she hated it. It seemed that Tom Bailey was doing well at work. They had renovated the kitchen and replaced all the furniture on the patio. The sun was starting to set, and the alcohol was beginning to affect my head. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until Karen leaned over to me and whispered in my ear, "Please stop looking at him." I muttered something in response, returned my attention to the couple we were sitting with, but didn't react at all. However, I couldn't resist looking at Bailey again just to make sure it was still going on. The constant distraction must have made our conversation less than ideal because, after a few minutes, the other couple excused themselves and left. "Honestly, John," Karen pleaded, "you have to stop looking at him. Forget he's even here." "He's looking at me," I said sharply, and it annoyed me. In fact, he stared, not just looked, and did so for most of the evening. His facial expression changed from an icy grimace to a mocking grin, basically resembling a petulant child. He also drank too much, which, in my opinion, was a bad combination. I thought it was worth keeping an eye on him. "He's just jealous," Karen said with a frown, looking around to make sure no one could hear us. "And to be honest, he's behaving incredibly childishly. But there's nothing we can do now, so please just ignore him. It's the best way." "Try to ignore someone who's been staring at the back of your head all evening," I replied. "It's almost as hard as ignoring someone who stabs you in the back." She crossed her arms over her chest and began nervously shaking her leg. "Well, I wish he would just go home. He's making a fool of himself. Maybe you should take him home. I think that's what he wants." Her face turned red, and she opened her mouth to respond but closed it and turned away. "You know," she said dreamily, "for a while, it even seemed to me that we were having a good time." "I agree with you," I replied, "for a while." That was before someone's eyes started boring into the back of my head. She finished her drink too quickly. "He's being childish," she repeated, as if that was the explanation. We sat in silence, both in a bad mood. I began to think thoughtfully. "How did it start?" I asked, trying to speak calmly. She took a deep breath and continued, not looking at me. "Honestly, Karen, the only thing I still don't understand from all these notes and conversations is how it all started in the first place. I don't want to talk about it." "And certainly not here," she said quickly. "Well, was it some kind of intrigue?" I asked. "Or, if you want me to say it, I wish this had never happened." She replied sharply, "Then don't drag it out of me. I regret it every damn day. I'm not trying to pull anything out of you, and I don't want to argue," I said. "It's just—" I shook my head. "I just don't understand how you could do this to me," I admitted, my voice calm, without pain or anger. "I don't understand how you— Do you understand that I would die for you, Karen, for us, for the girls?" "This is not an exaggeration," I said, shaking my head again. "I would have died. I still have someone to die for, but it has nothing to do with you anymore." "Damn you," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand, holding back tears. "Don't you dare do this to me now." I shrugged. "Okay, sorry." I looked at the sunset, my mind wandering. "You know, sometimes it just comes over me at the most unexpected moments." "You don't have to apologize to me for this," she said softly. "Maybe not, but I still do." I glanced around. He left. "Do you think he went home?" "I don't want to think about him," she said, her voice flat. I studied the bottle of beer in my hand, a strange desire coming over me. "Well, do you want to dance?" She didn't answer immediately, probably thinking I was being sarcastic. "Come on," I teased her. "What do you say? I'm no better than I was, but I'm unlikely to be any worse now." She looked at me, her expression softening. "It's hard to believe you ever wanted to dance with me." "Why?" I asked. "I wouldn't want to dance with me either." She gave a small smile, a timid expression lighting up her face. "But there's not even music here." A couple of minutes later, we stood on the lawn at the edge of the terrace, swaying to non-existent tunes playing in our heads. We didn't hold each other close, didn't put our heads on each other's shoulders, nothing like that. We just held hands and moved gently with the rhythm of our thoughts. Some of the other couples glanced at us from time to time, probably thinking they were witnessing a touching moment, but it wasn't that. It was more like, "Concluding a truce," she said, looking somewhere over my shoulder. This was the closest physical communication between us since she lowered her head, not finishing her sentence. I'm aware of it, I replied, waiting. Her lips moved slightly, and I could almost see the internal conversation happening in her mind. I knew that once she figured it out, she would invite me into the conversation. I want to be on your side, she finally said, her eyes filled with sadness. I want to be on the side that's focused on making life easier for the girls. You're already on this side, I replied. You were on it from the very beginning. She snorted, her voice tinged with frustration. Only when it was convenient for me, or when you forced me there. Fair enough, I said. There are some rules about being on this side that I don't think you'll like. I don't have to like them, she said. Just tell me, and I'll live up to your expectations. There's only one rule, actually, I continued. If you ever try to take them away from me, I will do everything I can to stop you. Without hesitation, without remorse, without regret. Like putting a dog to sleep. I will protect them. I kept dancing, speaking in a calm, non-threatening tone, with no intention of intimidating her. It was just another cold fact. To her credit, Karen didn't tense up or try to pull away. That's why I know you're a good father, she said quietly. Later that night, feeling thirsty, I went into the kitchen to pour myself some water. Her phone sat on the counter, vibrating with the screen lit up. I glanced at it, 17 missed calls, all from the evening, after the party had ended. On Saturday morning, I found myself alone in the grocery store. There were hardly any other customers, mostly men over 40. The older woman behind the counter noticed me looking around, or perhaps she was just being friendly. We call it Divorced Dad's Day, she explained with a smile. On Saturday mornings, it's just a routine for the guys who are adjusting to the changes. Divorced fathers go shopping. She leaned towards me conspiratorially, her plump figure slightly brushing against the scanner. I think it's because there are no happy couples here to remind them that they're single. All the happy people are at home with their families. I just looked at her without reacting. After a moment, she straightened up, interpreting my silence as a sign that she had made a mistake. Sorry, she muttered, rushing to finish packing. I saw the ring on your finger and just assumed. Karen seemed to mean what she said, because the following weeks went relatively smoothly at home. She was all smiles, and we even managed to function well as a family team. She made an effort to plan her absences so that it would have minimal impact on the girls. And maybe, just maybe, she was trying to lessen her influence on me, too. Despite her efforts, I began to feel the weight of being constantly at home, so I started taking the girls out more often during Karen's absences. Before the summer ended, we went on 2 more short trips and visited several interesting places within a 100-kilometer radius from home. I also traded in my sedan for a newer, roomier van, a family car, not much different from the one Karen had quickly traded in. I bought a decent extendable trailer as well. Karen accepted these trips without complaint, though I could see it was painful for her to miss such valuable moments. Her smile seemed sadder with each passing day, and the dark circles under her eyes became more noticeable. She started taking something to help her fall asleep at night, though it didn't seem to help much. However, she didn't hide her concerns about the financial impact of these trips. I understand that you think this is justified, John, she said one evening, sorting through a stack of bills and statements. And I'm fully aware that I have no right to lecture you. But these are all unnecessary expenses, and they're just ruining us. They'll never be able to retire, she said. After all, who really wants to retire? I grinned. Look, we have trust funds from my parents' legacy to pay for college and support the girls as they begin their lives, and your retirement is still a long way off. To be honest, I added, I'm not planning on stopping work. I can't even imagine what I'd do if I had to sit idle at home for years. I smiled bitterly. I'd probably do something unwise like develop an unhealthy habit. She bit her lip, putting aside the statements and bills. There were times when you talked about selling the house, buying a motorhome, and traveling around the country, just the two of us, looking for adventure. I gave a short, dismissive laugh. She turned away. I guess that's all in the past now, huh? She said quietly. You couldn't seriously think I still wanted to do that with you? I asked, a note of disbelief in my voice. She gave me that same sad smile. For a long time, I didn't think at all, she admitted. I just acted without considering the consequences. What can I say to that? I thought for a moment. It's clear then. I decided to move on to the inevitable topic. You know, at some point, we'll probably need to sit down and decide when it's right to finalize the divorce. We'll need to think about when the girls are old enough to handle it. Her eyes widened, and her face went pale. I ignored it. After all, she knew this day would come. We had never intended to make this permanent. I thought maybe a little after they went to college, it would be easier, I continued. That way, they'd be distracted. But now, it's no longer something I can ignore. Without saying another word, she ran out of the room. The chair she'd been sitting in was knocked over, and papers were scattered on the floor. I collected them and started organizing them into piles. There was silence between us for a few days after that. Then, everything returned to normal. In fact, this routine continued for several weeks, and I began to think that maybe we had finally found a system that worked for us. After all, divorce wasn't something we needed to deal with immediately. It was still years away. The winter came late, with changeable weather, leaving October with damp dew instead of the usual crisp coolness and early snowfalls. I began to notice that Karen had been spending more time at home in recent weeks and that she started leaving her phone charging when we went out as a family. But I didn't think much about what that might mean. Mostly, I was just hoping things would continue as they were. So, I was completely unprepared when she sat down on the couch across from me one night, looking tired and worried, and said, "It's all over. I can't do this anymore, John." She explained, "It's too hard, and I feel ashamed of myself all the time. I can't live like this anymore." I held my breath but said nothing as she folded her hands and stared at them. "You know," she continued, "sometimes, when I'm all alone or when I'm in the shower, I just start crying and can't stop. I'm trying to pull myself together, but I can't. No matter what I do, I just cry and cry. I can't stop." She shook her head bitterly, her voice growing harsher. "You of course did your best to make me understand that I must follow your rules in order to save myself. You made me think that time would somehow solve all the problems I created, if I just moved on, step by step. For a while, I even thought I was lucky." She shook her head again, faster and more harshly. "But anyway, it's over now. You can do whatever you want, but I'm telling you now, this is the end." I sat motionless, only my eyes moved slightly. I was completely unprepared for this. "I warned you what would happen if you tried to take them from me," I reminded her. "Take them? What are you talking about?" She stopped and frowned. No, I'm not talking about us, John. I'm talking about Carl. Or, more accurately, me and Carl. This is the end. I told him 3 days ago, and it just took me a while to work up the courage to tell you." "Unacceptable," I said sharply. Even to myself, my voice sounded muffled and powerless. She noticed this and gave me a tired smile. "It's too late," she said, her voice calm. "Because this is really the end, and I'm actually pleased to say this. Think about what you're doing, Karen. Think about what will happen if you do this," I urged, my voice steady despite the confusion swirling in my mind. She looked at me carefully, without fear. "You know," she said dreamily, "I was really afraid of you for a long time. You said these terrible things. You knew everything. You knew everything I thought you couldn't know. You said it so sternly, so seriously. You literally led me by the nose. I truly believe that every threat you made was true, that the only way to survive this without loss was to submit. For a while, I even believed I was lucky that you let me stay. I really thought this was the only way to save at least something from my life." She knitted her brows, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Was I really that blind? Or were you just such a good magician? Because I swear, I saw an angry dog in front of me. I heard the most horrible sounds I've ever heard in my life. I just reacted to them like a mindless creature, not realizing that I was the one who cornered you. I didn't see that you were in danger all this time." She wiped the tears from her eyes. "I'm sorry I did this to you. I'm sorry for backing you into a corner, leaving only your own anger to defend yourself. You will never know how sorry I am because you would never be so cruel as to do that to another person. You would never do what I did." A bitter smile escaped her lips. "To be honest, I don't even know what to feel about the last 6 months, or even the whole last year. I know that this feeling is deep shame, but aside from that, all this time seems to be covered in fog for me. And only now am I starting to see something clearly." She looked at me expectantly, but I didn't say anything. I felt like a prison guard, watching in horror as the prisoner began to realize that she had always had the means to escape. And I was scared. She continued, "Do you know what's the strangest thing? It's just ended. That's it." In one moment, I looked at him and everything was gone. I didn't feel anything. I didn't want anything. I just wished it had never existed. She saw that I was looking at her and took it for a sign of emotion. She tried to take my hand, but I couldn't bear to touch her. I rubbed my hands together, trying to erase the sensation. I was physically sickened, by her, by him, by everything. A bitter laugh escaped her throat again. He didn't take it very well when I told him the truth. She rolled up her sleeve, showing me the remains of a bruise that wrapped around her arm. I don't think this will surprise you, and I don't understand why I was surprised. I ruined my life for a man who isn't ashamed to use force against me. She looked at me carefully, but I didn't respond. Not a word. Honestly, she said quietly, you may have known about his nature all along, John. Maybe that's why you pushed me to go down this path. She studied my face, waiting for some kind of reaction. But I remained silent. She sighed and rolled her sleeve back down. I was such a fool. I remained such a fool. She swallowed hard, and I noticed a tear slowly roll down her cheek. So now it's time to understand who you are, John, she said, her voice catching. Are you the one who gives up when the struggle gets too hard? Or are you the one who stays at the table even after his latest bluff has been called? She froze, gasping for breath. I'll tell you honestly, John, I would really like you to be the one who stays. She shook her head again, trying to suppress her sobs. I just regret that I didn't understand this earlier. She got up, gathered herself, and headed towards the door. But when she reached the threshold, she stopped, looked back, and said, and you really need to eat more, John. For your own health, your skin and bones. I looked away, and she left. For a long time, I just sat in the darkened room, the shadows slowly covering the space, unsure of what to think or what to do. Closer to midnight, I finally got up and rubbed my eyes. I'm not hungry, I said to no one in particular. November passed like a prolonged illness, exhausting and disorienting. It warped the flow of time, and by the time it had left, we were more drained and weakened than before. Karen was now constantly at home. She still claimed that the affair was. I might wish it weren't true, if I weren't so busy praying it was true, she said, her voice filled with a mix of longing and uncertainty. She was attentive and caring, but she remained distant. I could see there were many thoughts and feelings swirling inside her, but she shared almost none of them. She gave me the impression of a widow or someone who was just beginning to realize how much she disliked herself. In any case, she was silent. We both continued to play family when the girls were around, but other than that, we didn't talk much. December was no better, and soon I began to hope that she would come out of this state. Why? I don't even know, but I probably started to worry it might affect the girls. That is, until a week before Christmas, when she asked me to stay late to talk. There was concern in her eyes, and it probably transferred to me because I felt something similar stir inside myself. We sat down at the kitchen table with glasses of wine in front of us, and she stared at her glass for a long time before finally looking up at me. I don't know what to do, and I need your help, she said, a hint of despair in her voice. With what? I asked, unsure. With us. With you. With me, first of all, probably, she said, reaching for the glass but stopping when her hands trembled. She carefully set it back down. I keep looking for a way to help you heal or somehow atone for all the harm I've done, but I can't find anything. I know I've messed it up, and I know you don't owe me anything. But I ask only one thing. Give me a chance to atone for my guilt, so that whatever happens next will be at least a little easier for all of us. I didn't understand what she was asking of me. I admitted slowly, I don't know what you want from me. You understand everything, she insisted. I know you do. Just let me know where we are, John. Let me know who we are. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to make promises. But just give me a little of this, please. It's not as easy as you think, honey, I replied, my voice calm. In fact, you're heading down a very dark path. I leaned back in my chair and drained my glass of wine in one gulp. You won't like this, I warned her quietly. I didn't ask to like it, she responded firmly. Good answer, I said, a small nod of approval. Okay, who am I to argue with you? I studied her for a moment, gauging the determination in her eyes. Let's see how long it lasts. You are nothing to me, I said bluntly. That's who you are. Nothing. Her determination didn't falter. Explain, she said, a slight edge to her voice. What's there to explain? I spread my hands. I don't even know who this person sitting across from me is. To be honest, this is a strange woman. Known to me, yes, but still strange. Oh, I think she has my wife's name, or what she used to call herself. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that you're not her. My wife had a small, round belly and felt comfortable with it. You don't have it. You're not her. My wife had long, beautiful hair that fell over her shoulders and framed a smile I adored. A smile that was special to me. You don't have it. You're not her. My wife drove a minivan, yours drives an SUV. My wife put family first. You put yourself first. And I'm sorry that I know so much about your love life, but I see clear evidence of what you like to do in bed or somewhere else. Something my wife never even tried. And I certainly wasn't going to try. So no, I leaned forward. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You're not my wife. You are not her. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. My wife was a wonderful person. I can't even describe it in words you'd understand. In a world full of women, she was the one. In a life full of questions, she was the answer. And I don't know if you'll ever understand how much I miss her. At the end, my voice shook, and I turned away, unable to look at her. She seemed to shrink a little in her seat, but the determination still remained on her face. She seemed prepared for this conversation to be difficult. I understand what you're saying, John, she said, her voice low and steady. Or... She looked away, noticing my warning expression. I understand what that means, but honestly, hair and figure are just looks. A car is just a car. These are minor changes. You can't seriously say that you'd rather see me a little plump than... Don't even dare. I interrupted her, a warning in my tone. She looked at me patiently, unfazed. A little plumper, she repeated. Than this one? I'm in the best shape I've ever been. Women compliment me all the time. I gained self-confidence. But looks are just that, John. They don't define me. They don't define us. I have a confidence that I never had before, she said. I'm happy with how I look. Is that so bad? Of course, I replied. Fine then, just stay like this and let these women take you for themselves. I don't mind. What worries me is my hair, she said, raising her hand to brush her bangs aside, ignoring my comment. It's just hair, John. I know you loved it when it was long, but it was so hard to take care of. Also, this is what women do in their 30s. They opt for short, more mature hairstyles. You can't tell me you don't think it's cute. I burst out laughing. You think you can argue with my feelings? Do you really believe this? Do you think if you just explained to me why I should love the hairstyle your lover chose for you, it'll suddenly happen by itself? Is that how feelings work? I just want to say that I'm sorry my motivation was driven by personal desires, she said, trying to calm me down. And no, by the way, he didn't choose this hairstyle for me. But this doesn't mean that the changes are bad. They don't depend on my mistakes. I was just a little too lazy to take care of myself. I needed to start thinking about my hair and body as an adult, like a woman over 30 who needs to take care of herself and think about what she will look like in the future. Heck, I changed my diet, started working out, and started looking for new hairstyles a few weeks before I started the affair. You can't seriously blame my haircut for that. They're not related. I waved my hand in surrender. You're still doing it, I remarked, sighing in irritation. You're trying to change my feelings with arguments and logic. This won't happen. There's no need for that. You understand this, right? As much as I miss my wife, I continued, I have to tell you I'm actually glad you're not her. Glad that the memories of the woman sitting in front of me are completely separate from the memories of the woman I loved. It made a lot of things easier for me. She didn't look pleased. Well, I don't want to go back to being that average woman with the obnoxious clothing size and messy hair, she said firmly. Then don't become like that. If you think so little of her, don't ever be her again. Why did you even decide that I was suggesting you do this? She asked, confused. Besides, I don't know who inspired you to think you used to look exactly like this, but you did. She stopped and involuntarily grinned. Now you've forced me to argue with my feelings. Just forget about it, okay? Forget it, I said, my voice low. She glared at me for a moment, then relaxed and tapped her finger on her glass of wine. What if I ask you another question? She asked, her tone soft. It would be better if you didn't, I replied, bracing myself. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. If you could answer this question without sarcasm, without bitterness, and without ridicule, I would be very grateful to you. But if you have to answer that way, I think I'll understand. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. If you were in my place, she said, her voice steady but serious, and had fallen as low as I have, and tried to make things right, what would you do? Where would you start? I looked at her for a moment, processing her words, before I answered. Nothing can be fixed, I said, my voice calm. Words are one thing, but you understand what I'm asking. I understand, I said slowly, thinking carefully. I would leave. I would leave and give everyone around me enough time to start recovering without me. If it had taken forever, I probably would never have returned. No, you wouldn't leave, she replied, shaking her head. You would never leave your family. Not by any means. You're right, I acknowledged. I wouldn't leave, but it was worth a try. I paused, then added, I'd probably do my best to get back to who I was before, the person with beliefs and dreams that wouldn't allow me to be so selfish for so long. I'd give up anything that wasn't part of who I was, and I'd probably pray that the shame of these actions would serve as some kind of lesson to me. Something like that. I took a deep breath. I think having an affair is a selfish thing, so I'm going to do my best not to do anything selfish for a very long time. I'll try. I don't know if I can, but I'll try to burn this desire in me. She fell silent for a moment, digesting my words. That's a lot to think about, she said quietly. And I was hurting a person I was having an affair with, even if he didn't deserve it, or if I thought he didn't deserve it. I'd have to hurt him a lot. She shuddered, clearly uncomfortable with the thought. Why? I asked. She hesitated, her voice shaky. Well, probably because for a while, he was more important to me than you. At some point, I made him happy at your expense, at your eternal expense. And if, at that moment, his happiness was more important to me than your feelings, than your life, I would have to show that now he doesn't matter to me anymore. I'd have to take it to the extreme opposite. To show you. I don't know what that would show, but I'd do it. I will do it, and never look back. She looked at me with wide eyes, her lips slightly parted. I believe you would, she said quietly. We sat in silence for a while. Then she spoke again. There's one more thing, John. If you're going to tell me you're pregnant, oh my God, no. I interrupted, amused by the thought. She saw my mocking smile and frowned. Very funny, she muttered. No, it's not funny, I said, still smiling. I couldn't help it, remembering the horror on her face earlier. She paused, collecting her thoughts, then continued, her voice more serious. I don't know how to say this, but... She glanced nervously at me, then quickly looked away. I understand that it's been a long time since you've had. I spent the night, and we were done here. I got up and left the room. In her defense, she didn't chase after me or call me back, and she did the right thing. Otherwise, it would have ended even worse. Dad. Yes, dear? Can I ask you a question? We had just returned from a movie on Friday, and I was surprised at how tired I felt. I had been looking forward to putting the girls to bed and finally getting some rest myself. Come on, sweetie, I said, feeling exhausted. The movie, right? Yes, Dad. The dad saved his family because he was strong, right? I took off my shoes. Of course, dear. Why aren't you so strong? I froze and closed my eyes. That was the question. I considered myself strong enough. No, you're not strong, she insisted. You're thin. Without hesitation, I turned to look at Karen. Her expression was a mix of pity and that I told you so look. Thank you for your support, I muttered under my breath. Damn you. I turned my back on them. I'm stronger than you think, I said into the void. I am stronger than all of you. But you're really skinny, came a second little voice from behind me. I don't know how she managed it, but everyone was there. I returned home after work one evening and found the house full of people, everyone from our social circle. People I used to see or hoped to see at Bailey's parties were all there. Even some who rarely appeared at such gatherings were sitting here and there, sipping drinks and laughing. There were people I didn't want to see, but I didn't notice them at first. As soon as I entered the house, Karen jumped up and loudly called everyone into the living room. I need everyone in the living room, she announced. I have an important announcement, and I need everyone to hear it. She met my gaze with a frozen question, but immediately turned away, gesturing for people to come into the living room. I walked around the corner, nervously curious, and felt my blood pressure rise. There, in the corner of the room, stood Carl. She invited him to my house? That man brought him here after everything that had happened over the past few months? After everything he had done to her? She brought him to her home, where our children live. Before I could react, Karen began speaking to the crowd. I have something to tell you, she announced. And it won't be easy for me, so I ask for your patience. She glanced at me, and I don't know what she saw, but then she took a deep breath and continued. I need everyone here to know what my husband has done for his family over the last year. I did something very selfish, something terrible, and he responded by giving his last strength to take care of someone other than himself. He dedicated himself to protecting our children, and I owe him more than I can express in words. Some people in the crowd glanced at me, unsure of what was happening. I didn't know either. Was she really going to do this? The secret didn't last long. I had an affair, she said. The words hit like a bomb, and the air seemed to vanish from the room. Suddenly, no one was looking at me anymore. There was nothing wrong with my marriage, nothing wrong with my husband or my life. I had just allowed myself to get bogged down. He got involved in something he shouldn't have, and, moreover, I deceived all of you in the process. Carl was looking around now, visibly nervous. All his friends would soon find out how safe it was to be near him. Our eyes met, and he seemed to have the audacity to look almost pleading. "Now you're on your own," I said. "Welcome to the club." "I had an affair," Karen continued, "and I stole time from my husband and children to be with another man. I risked everything I had for nothing. I didn't even try to stop it. I felt like this is what life owed to me. And to make matters worse, the person who seduced me, distracting me from those whose lives I was supposed to protect, is none other than my husband's so-called friend, Carl Jensen." There were signs of shock in the room, followed by muffled whispers. "He stalked me. He seduced me, and I let him. Moreover, I wanted it myself. I encouraged him." People began to look at each other, exchanging glances, finding Carl with their eyes, whispering to their spouses. He suddenly became very interested in finding his shoes. "Some of you may have complimented me on the changes in my appearance over the past year," Karen said. "So these changes became possible, partly thanks to my affair. They were my way of distancing myself from the woman I was and the people I loved." She spread her arms, revealing herself to the group. "It's not so nice to see me from this side, is it? Some of you may remember how, at one of the summer parties, my husband began to feel ill, even though he hadn't been drinking much. That was because he found out that Carl and I were using all of you to play a little game, to test how much we could act like a couple in front of you while continuing to mislead you. We were selfish, stupid, and cruel. And some of you may not want to remain my friends after this, but I hope that you will remain close to John. He fights for his family, for the happiness of his daughters, and it's destroying him. You all saw it. It's unlikely anyone didn't notice how thin he had become or how quiet he had become. He lost everything, and instead of dwelling on it, he does everything he can to make sure others don't lose as well." She looked at me again, smiled tiredly, and continued. "You also need to know that Carl was very skillful and persistent in his seduction. I won't pretend that it was difficult to win me over, but without going into details, I promise you that it was a determined, almost professional attempt. I'm telling you this as a warning, so you'll be more careful than I was." She looked around the room, like a teacher waiting for questions. Then she said, "I'm sorry for luring you here under false pretenses. I'm sorry I abused your trust in me in the past. I understand that now it seems like the party is over, but I ask you to stay, drink, talk, have fun, gossip about me. Ask John how he's feeling. Let your kids play downstairs. I'll leave so I won't bother you anymore. Moreover," she pursed her lips, "it's time for me to go to my mother and tell her what I've been doing all these months." She walked up to me and extended her arms for a hug. I hugged her for a second and then stepped back. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "There's no need for that." But she looked almost lifeless, barely warming herself, as she turned to leave. I watched her go and then turned around to face a sea of eyes staring back at me. I forced a half smile and shrugged my shoulders. "Is anyone in this house going to offer me a drink?" I asked. What else could be said? There was awkward laughter, but the rest of the evening went by quietly. Carl didn't stay. "You could have warned me," I told Karen. "At least give me a chance to stop you if I didn't want it to happen." "On the contrary," she said. "I was even a little amused. Maybe it even made me happy." She nodded slightly. "Anyway, I was afraid that something would go wrong, that people would start calling and canceling, or that I'd chicken out at the last minute. And then, this would be another way for you to realize that I failed you." A faint smile flashed across her face. "Try to dissuade me from humiliating myself like that, but it was necessary," she said, a faint smile on her face. I couldn't help but laugh. "You managed to solve a lot of problems with one move, huh?" "I didn't harm anyone," she replied. "I just rattled the cage." She scooped up some oatmeal with a spoon, tasted it, and blew on it before continuing. "You know, not everyone will turn their backs on him. At least, not right away. There will be a scandal, and then everything will calm down, and that'll be the end of it. But they won't feel as comfortable with him as they did before. They won't invite him over as freely. Over time, they'll call less, and without realizing it, they'll stop inviting him to their gatherings. They'll gradually push him out, and perhaps they won't even notice how it happened." She tried the oatmeal again. Or maybe it would have been like that if they'd had the chance. "One thing I know for sure is that Carl is a master at avoiding conflict. I don't think he'll ever give them the chance to push him away." I nodded. "Agreed. He'll pretend everything is fine, but in a few weeks, people will notice he doesn't call or answer. He'll just disappear. At heart, he's a coward, a whiny weakling, if anything. And you've just taken away all his friends. I'm surprised he hasn't been cutting off our phones yet. He used to call me in the morning, hoping to minimize the chance that you'd answer, but he won't do that either. Because doing so would mean admitting that I hurt him. Now he's in face-saving mode, which means no contact. I nodded, and for several minutes, we sat in silence. Neither of us ate. Tell me, I said, breaking the silence. How did you know I wouldn't get angry or feel humiliated? I mean, you literally made me look like a fool in front of everyone we knew. How did you know I wouldn't be mad at you? The same faint half-smile flashed across her face, but this time, there was sadness in her eyes. I had no doubt about how you would react to my little statement, she said quietly. You're too old to worry about trivial things like other people's opinions, and you don't have to worry about that, because you always react in a balanced and calm way. You always show that you care about the people around you. So, I knew you weren't going to get angry. And I knew people would react the way they did. They respect you, they love you, and that's why I knew they would want to be there for you. Memories of the support I received yesterday made me smile again. They were truly wonderful people. No, she said, shaking her head. It's you, John. Her face hardened, full of self-loathing. It's a pity that I forgot this. It's a pity that I stopped seeing everything that makes you wonderful and began to see you as predictable, boring. She shrugged. Maybe that's not entirely true. I never stopped seeing you as a great person. I just started seeing myself as something more. I thought I was special without realizing it. I thought I was smarter and more worthy than the people around me. She looked down at the oatmeal. I was such a fool. We agree on that, I said softly. And now, it will probably cost you your friends too. Well, anyway, thanks for yesterday, she added, her voice lighter. It was nice. I smiled. Stupid, but nice. Then it would have been worth it. I took a sip of coffee. It's nice when we can agree on something. A week passed, and another surprise awaited me. I pulled into the garage on Wednesday after work, and in place of the almost new SUV was an old sedan. I stood for several minutes, staring at the obvious signs of its age and peering into the windows. There were some of Karen's things on the stand. I went inside. Did something happen to the car? I asked, surprised. Oh, she said, not looking up from washing the dishes. I just thought I needed something different, something more mine, you know? She was intently scrubbing a dish. It's funny. When I bought this big SUV, I was delighted. I thought this was exactly what I needed. It seemed like it was perfect for me. And now, I realize I don't like it at all. It's uncomfortable on the highway. It feels like I'm driving a boat. And the gas it consumes is terrible. People change their minds. This is fine. She dropped the lid of the pan into the water, causing a splash. I can't even understand what I like so much about it in the first place. It just makes me miserable. So, I decided to go with something different, something that feels more like me. She sighed. The problem is, we now have so little money. The money I got from the SUV had to cover the cost of the car taxes and some other things. So, I had to lower my expectations. She washed the lid and began draining the water. The hardest thing is that I want our old family minivan back more than anything, she added. She dipped her hands into the water again. But that's also fine. Now, when we go somewhere as a family, we take your minivan, so I don't need a car for more than just getting around. I studied the car for a few seconds. That makes sense, I said, about to say something else but unable to find the right words. She turned to me. Yeah? There were dark circles under her eyes, and there was no expectation or demand in her gaze. I went back to the bedroom to change clothes and find my book. Sometimes, when you both understand something, it's okay if neither of you says it aloud. So this is where we find ourselves. We had gotten along well for quite some time, and after Karen ended things with Carl, she devoted herself entirely to her family. She managed to maintain a perfect balance. Her presence was always felt, but she never crossed the line or became intrusive. A few weeks passed after the party, and I noticed that I no longer felt irritated every time she entered the room. I won't pretend that I didn't get some satisfaction from seeing the dark circles under her eyes or the blank stare that appeared when she was lost in thought, but I didn't let this contribute to the situation. From the outside, our cooperation might have seemed like a positive sign, a manifestation of unity for a common goal. We were, after all, behaving like friendly colleagues united by an important project. Isn't that what I might want? The obvious answer is no. The problem was that Karen didn't want to be just a nice colleague. Her interests went much further. and she wasn't going to give them up now that she no longer had any other emotional or physical outlet. She restrained herself as best as she could, but still, every day it became more difficult for her to hide her needs. Her restraint began to crack at the seams, and I waited for the moment when all her appearance of calm would completely collapse. Warning signs appeared during the first weekend after the party. She began a small but persistent campaign filled with subtle touches. She would take my hand while asking a question, then quickly touch my shoulder to say good morning, or even hug me in front of her daughters, knowing that in their presence, I wouldn't be able to pull away. I still tried to keep my distance, and every time I noticed her reaching out to me, I tried to move away. But over time, these touches began to achieve their goal. They started to feel terribly, terribly normal. I should have made more of an effort to avoid them, or just openly asked her to stop. But underneath it all, there was a bigger problem. I really liked these physical interactions, even if they irritated me and turned everything inside me upside down. On the other hand, I felt incredibly lonely, and even that small, simple moment, her fingers squeezing my shoulder while she said good morning, was perhaps the most human thing I had experienced in a long time. No matter how much I tried to move away from her, inside me, there was a desire to feel at least one more touch, to be reminded that I was still human. Perhaps if I had some way out, something that allowed me to consider my needs in advance, I could have easily avoided the situation. But the whole experience felt more like being shot in the chest and trying to leave one last message for your children before the blood stopped flowing. You are in a fog of shock, with all your rapidly diminishing energy focused on one task that is worth doing. Everything else fades into the background. No matter what, however, this is probably just an excuse, but that's exactly how I felt then. I completely stopped caring about myself because I was just a ghost, a phantom to myself. Coming back to reality, I was completely unprepared for what awaited me. Her fleeting touches, the slight movement of her finger along my arm when she asked if the girls liked the movie, reminded me that life is not just about mechanical breathing, not just about waiting for the day when this breathing will stop. This is perhaps the essence of what infidelity does to you. If I reconsider these words now, they may seem exaggerated or overly dramatic, but if you remember how I felt at the time, they don't even convey a fraction of the reality. These are flat sketches of what was, in truth, deep and complex. I just couldn't bring myself to tell her no. This realization frightened me because my future was threatened. I certainly wasn't falling in love with Karen again. She was no longer someone I could love, and I still didn't have any intimate desires for her. But I was aware that her actions, no matter how small, were gradually eroding my much-needed isolation and self-control. I knew this had to stop. I knew it had to end. But now her nail was gently scratching my neck. Couldn't I really wait a couple more days before asking her to stop? I kept putting off this conversation. I acknowledged that this was a weakness on my part. Then, two events happened that became harbingers of a more serious confrontation. Karen began to react a little more harshly toward me and started wearing revealing outfits at home. There are things that cannot be expressed in words, things that become clear only because you've known a person for a long time. Seeing the slightest changes in their behavior from the outside, this small shift in her mood could have raised 1,000 questions, but I had only one simple and completely obvious explanation. It was the last thing I wanted to deal with. My wife wanted intimacy. Every day, her persistence grew. Her single touches began to happen more frequently, and the short touches began to linger. If I pulled away, she would just smile to herself, as if she knew something, and try again later. Perhaps she believed that if she could establish close enough physical contact, I would eventually break down and give in. But the problem was that I was very far from that point, and her own disappointment was growing faster than my walls were crumbling. It was obvious where this was headed, yet when it finally happened, it took us both by surprise. It was evening. The children had gone to bed. She again reached out to me as if by accident, but clearly with certain intentions. She was wearing a t-shirt and tight panties. When I pulled away for the 1,000th time, she frowned and exploded. "Damn it, John. I'm trying. Can't you at least let me massage your shoulders for a little while?" "Oh, of course," I replied. "What could be more harmless than coming up and starting to massage your shoulders while wearing your underwear? Of course, later you'll say I have a lot of tension in my shoulders, right? And then you'll have to lean on them harder while your hips press against my back." I snorted. How could I not have guessed? "It's so innocent." "You don't have to be so sarcastic," she said, sitting down on the chair opposite me, crossing her arms over her chest. "Yeah, okay. I'm trying to seduce you, and we both know it. I know it, and what's wrong with that? I want love from my own husband. Yes, what kind of monster am I becoming? Her face softened, and there was a pleading look in her eyes. I'm human, John. I have my own needs, and you have them too. Don't ignore them. I mean, it's been so long for you. Don't say it doesn't bother you. You must be tired of this. She fell silent. Something in my expression told her too much. Oh, she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. You must be joking. She took a deep breath. You don't even do that. You don't do this at all, John. You need to see a psychologist or someone. This isn't normal. No. I jumped up. No, damn it. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured about intimacy by that damn Carl. I won't let you make me feel guilty or ashamed for not wanting anything from a body that belonged to that man. The haircut you gave him and the new skills he taught you. So you can? I silenced myself and raised my hands in a conciliatory gesture. I appreciate everything you've done to make this easier for me, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I see that you want to fix everything. I see it, but there comes a time when fixing it is simply impossible. Sometimes you treat cancer, and everything gets better, but sometimes the only thing left is to do everything you can to make the person comfortable. You made me comfortable. For that, I am grateful. But now, it's time to let it go. She crossed her arms, not about to give up. You know, sometimes people stay in bed even after cancer is defeated. They're afraid, John. They're afraid to get out of bed. They're afraid to return to life, as if it has a future again. And then they just need someone to kick them, to make them finally start living. This made me angry, and in a fit of rage, I blurted out, You are a very vile person, Karen. Do you know that? I examined her from head to toe. You were a beautiful woman. You had a beautiful family and a beautiful life, and you gave it all up to become Carl's skinny society girl. So do us all a favor and go to hell. I left before she could respond. For the next few days, she was as cold as ice towards me, and all her little touches disappeared like water in the sun. In fact, she almost stopped talking to me and did everything she could to avoid being in the same room as me. I couldn't tell if she was angry, giving up, or just offended. Her expression remained unreadable. What surprised me was that I felt somewhat disappointed. I had liked these past weeks of peaceful cooperation. The feeling that we were working together, although unwanted touches, provided a sense of security and stability that, oddly enough, I appreciated. Because, as long as she was trying to get back to me, I didn't have to face the pain of confronting everything else. I didn't have to worry about the future. I wasn't afraid that she would give up, return to Carl, or simply get tired and demand a divorce. I didn't have to fear unexpected problems or intense conflicts. I just liked to think that we were on the same side, even if there were no romantic overtones to it. Now, I was suspended again, and I was at a loss, unable to guess what was on her mind. I could only wait for the next step, and I went through various scenarios in my head. I spent days thinking through every detail. What would a divorce look like financially? How often would I be able to see the children? Would she marry again? Would this new man be a father to the girls? What kind of father would he be? Old fears began to resurface. The thought ate at me that the girls would grow up with a new dad, and I would miss important moments in their lives. I would learn about them after the fact, and it would be too late to offer any advice or support. This was the last step into the abyss of loneliness, the final breath of the life I once had. It was difficult for me to stay in one place for more than a few seconds. I walked back and forth until my foot was bruised. I began to spend more time with the children, trying to participate in their games and leisure activities. I didn't know how much longer I'd have this opportunity, and I wanted to soak up as many of these moments as possible before it was too late. Then one morning, I entered the kitchen and found breakfast already prepared. A huge, massive breakfast served in absurdly large portions. Karen was already sitting at the table, in front of a similar portion. This abundance of pancakes, eggs, hash browns, and sausages seemed especially ridiculous in front of this fragile, fit woman. It seems you overdid it, I remarked dryly, sitting down at the table. Karen just shrugged. I'll eat my portion if you eat yours. You won't be able to cope with this even if you eat all day. I bet I can do a better job than you, she said, smiling slightly. I tapped the plate with my fork, looked at the mountain of food, and then turned my gaze to her smile. What is this, Karen? Is this some kind of hint? No, not a hint, she replied. This is a challenge. She pointed to the food. This is what we will work on together. Then she simply picked up her fork, her smile widening. Let's get fat, honey, together. And with these words, she put the food in her mouth. I looked at the food again. What if I'm not hungry? It's okay, she said with her mouth full. I'm not really hungry either. Yes, okay, I admitted, laughing. I looked at this and even ate my breakfast. Summer was approaching when something happened that I did not expect at all. Maybe it was because she had gained a little weight during those months of big breakfasts, or maybe it was because I had gained weight again. Maybe it was the calmness, or her new haircut. She had given herself a bob, which, to be honest, it didn't suit her at all, but she planned to try different options as her hair grew out. Perhaps the reason was the season itself. Maybe the call of spring was to blame, or maybe it was something else. No, these are all excuses. I just got really drunk. I drank myself into oblivion and ended up sleeping with my wife. It's funny, but time is the main character in this whole story. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I didn't even bother to mention it, to introduce it, to tell what it did or how it influenced us. I didn't give her flowers or say goodnight. But time, it seems, has decided everything in my life up to this point, and it will probably continue to do so in the future. Hatred, anger, fear, love, passion, these are all just subjects of the great king of time, and he disposes of them as he pleases. If I ever need to write a sequel, this is where I'll start. You know how in stories, the characters get out of a marriage, and they go a little crazy, trying to hook up with everyone they can? But the truth is, even a complete lack of intimacy is still a form of intimate life, and your body reacts to it. This is where time comes into play. Over time, your body gets used to being apart, and even thinking about intimacy becomes difficult. I hardly thought about it for a long time. But that evening, Karen looked and sounded like Karen, my long-lost wife, not the woman who had done all those things. It was amazing how big the difference was, and it was a good evening. We spent it among friends. I drank more than usual, laughed a little louder than usual, and we danced again. Well, you understand how it happens. You may be thinking that this is the moment when everything was supposed to fall into place. You might be nodding to yourself, thinking, this is the moment when all is forgiven, and I'm encouraged to believe in a happy ending. But no, despite everything Karen has gone through, suffered, and some things that had grown in that year would never return. Periodically, flashes of anger or pain would surface, appearing out of nowhere and clouding all my thoughts. They were absolutely terrifying. There was some important piece of the puzzle missing, something that had once been us, and it could never be restored. And to be honest, I was no longer myself. I had changed because of her betrayal, just as she had once changed. It took me years to understand what had changed. Oh, I think I've become quieter. I was less emotionally involved in the world around me, with the exception of the girls. I don't think I've ever trusted anyone the way I once trusted the mother of my children. I couldn't be that person anymore. I hated my gullibility for allowing this to happen. So, a certain sense of isolation lived within me despite any choices I made. But it's manageable, and I've been able to deceive it enough that it doesn't interfere with my decision-making. If you have enough strength, anything is possible. Over the next 6 months, after that first drunken night, Karen and I slept together several more times. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't wild, it wasn't passionate, and it didn't communicate anything beyond the simplest of movements. I didn't feel that it meant anything, that we were expressing something with this. She seemed to accept it, but with each passing month, her face grew older as she waited for me to come back. Eventually, I think she realized she was waiting in vain. That was the day I returned home and found her with a bottle of wine and a manila envelope. "This is an apartment," she said, as if addressing no one. Her eyes were empty, and she looked straight ahead. I studied her sitting there, trying to remain calm as she completed the final chapter of our story together. One way or another, I knew I was witnessing a pivotal moment. I think I was impressed by her composure. I looked at the envelope. "Is this for me?" I asked. She shook her head. "For me," I nodded. I didn't ask why. All the time she wasn't around, all the events that happened without her participation had strengthened something between me and the girls that she had never managed to gain. Oh, she tried, but a certain dynamic had already formed, and all she could do was watch it from the side. So she kept her promise. She put the girls first. "You don't have to do this," I suggested, not knowing if I truly meant it. "Yes, I do. Everything works quite well here. It's been a long time, John, enough time so that we can do everything right, and the girls are fine," she said, tapping her finger on the glass of wine. "None of us really lives. Soon, the girls will be old enough to understand what this means and will begin to wonder what it says about us." She finished the wine in one gulp. "Don't you want to show them what it means for an adult to be happy?" I thought about her words. I want them to be happy, But maybe you're right, and this is the next step to ensuring that. I sighed. Can we afford it? She nodded, her face expressionless, but the corners of her lips drooped. It will be hard, but I can work harder. You are already working more, I said. Another nod. I sat down opposite her, and they should stay with you. I would like to come to see them in the evenings, to be with them, if possible. I won't disturb you. Her lips pressed into a thin line. But if you try to keep me from seeing them, I will fight for them. I smiled wider than I thought I was capable of and put my hand on hers. I'm so glad you're back, I said. That was it. I was never sure I made the right decision in those first months after I found out about my wife's infidelity. My logic was flawed, and any child psychologist would have said that I was making a mistake by staying with her. Some people probably doubt that so much pain can be hidden. I don't know what to answer them, except to offer a glimpse of the sincere smiles of two happy children. Even in the most difficult months, every second spent with my girls was a pain-free second. They were the balm I needed most. I don't pretend that I was thinking clearly at the time, but I can't say I would have acted differently if I had to go through it again. I'm probably a little biased in my story, and for that, I apologize. It's easier for me to admit the things I don't regret, so that's what I'm describing. I don't regret putting my pain second to my responsibilities as a parent. It comes easily to me. I do not regret that I took a risk, hoping to protect my children from disaster, and therefore these words also come easily to paper. On the other hand, it's hard for me, as someone who cares about morality, to look back and analyze what role I played in what happened to Carl. But even this. But I didn't tell you about this, did I? Like I said, admitting regrets is much harder. Today, I feel that the world is a cup full of suffering. It makes me sad when I remember how I helped fill it, even in those moments when it seemed justified. In any case, years later, when the girls were already in high school, they presented me with a small but significant trophy of my victory. By then, they had grown into beautiful young women, and every time I looked at them, I felt so proud that it almost hurt. One day, they came home from school talking about a friend who was going through a hard time. You see, her parents are getting divorced. It's so sad, said my eldest. Her dad lives in an apartment like her mom, only worse, because he lives so far away. Since the summer, she sees him only on weekends. She says there's so much going on that she forgets to tell him everything. She's afraid that, in the end, he won't understand her. At least her parents don't fight now. The younger one interrupted. Remember when we were there on the 4th of July, and they started yelling at each other? It was terrible. She turned to me, her eyes wide and filled with tears. We missed all the fireworks because we spent the whole night trying to calm poor Elizabeth down so she would stop crying. Her parents were so busy fighting that they didn't even check what was wrong with her. I don't think they even noticed that she heard everything, the eldest explained. They probably thought she was having fun, but in reality, she was suffering from what they were doing. But they were too busy with their own arguments to think about anyone else. The younger one nodded. I'm so glad you and Mom never went through that, Dad. I don't know what we would do. I thought about it for a moment. I can never get so angry that you stop being my first priority, I told them. Not for anyone or anything. I hope that someday I'll be as good a mother as you, Dad, the eldest smiled. I chuckled. Don't worry. There's a special love that a parent feels for a child, and it decides everything. It may sound strange or scary, but it's actually the best thing you will ever learn. You two take up so much space in my heart and guard it so well that I have very little left. But that's enough for me. One day, when you have your own children, and they look at you and smile, I think you will understand what I mean. Well, I leaned forward over the table. Would you like to order pizza? Thank all the gods above. They wanted to. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you. And go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about clicking to the next one.